In the rugged hills of Tennessee, where the Cumberland Trail wound its treacherous path through untamed wilderness, there existed an establishment that travelers whispered about with a mixture of reverence and unease. The Blackwood Lodge, they called it, and those who had experienced its legendary hospitality spoke of comforts that went far beyond simple lodging. 3 sisters operated this remote sanctuary, and weary men would arrive as strangers but depart feeling as though they had discovered something extraordinary, something worth the perilous journey back through hostile territory. The Blackwood sisters had cultivated a reputation that spread across 4 states. Welcome back to the Holloway Archives, where we uncover the darkest secrets hidden in America's forgotten corners. I'm your host, and today we're venturing into a tale that will chill you to the bone. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss stories like this. And let me know in the comments what state you're watching from. I love connecting with fellow mystery enthusiasts across the nation. Merchants would deliberately extend their routes to pass through Blackwood Lodge, even if it meant weeks of additional travel through dangerous mountain passes. Cattle drivers would risk attacks from hostile tribes rather than miss the opportunity to experience what they described as otherworldly hospitality. Those fortunate enough to have stayed there spoke of a tension so personal, so intensely focused, that hardened frontiersmen would find themselves reluctant to leave. But in the autumn of 1847, disturbing reports began filtering into settlements throughout Tennessee and Kentucky. Travelers spoke of finding abandoned wagons along the Cumberland Trail, their contents scattered, but their owners nowhere to be found. Local sheriffs initially dismissed these accounts as typical frontier hazards, until a pattern emerged that could no longer be ignored. The year was 1829. When Ezekiel Blackwood succumbed to consumption, leaving behind a prosperous mountain estate and 3 daughters aged 18 to 28. Nestled in the remote highlands between the Cumberland Gap and the Tennessee River, the Blackwood property encompassed nearly 1,000 acres of prime mountain land, complete with livestock, cultivated fields, and, most crucially, a strategically positioned lodge that served pioneers heading west on the Cumberland Trail. Victoria, the eldest at 28, possessed the calculating intelligence of a born entrepreneur and the ruthless pragmatism that would later prove so devastating. Isabella, 23, had inherited their mother's striking beauty and an almost mystical ability to make any man feel like the center of the universe. Constance, the youngest at 18, shared her late mother's extensive knowledge of Appalachian herbs and their various applications, knowledge that would prove far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The Blackwood estate had been established by their grandfather in 1795, when the Cumberland Trail was barely more than a dangerous path carved through hostile wilderness. By 1829, it had evolved into one of the most respected waypoints for settlers, traders, and adventurers seeking passage to the fertile valleys of Middle Tennessee. The main lodge, an impressive 2-storied timber structure with fieldstone foundations, commanded a stunning view of the valley below. The guests' quarters consisted of 8 comfortable rooms, a spacious common hall featuring massive stone hearths, and a kitchen capable of serving dozens of travelers simultaneously. What distinguished the Blackwood establishment wasn't merely its location or facilities, but the reputation for exceptional service that had been carefully cultivated over more than 3 decades. Travelers would speak in distant towns about the warmth of the Blackwood welcome, the quality of their mountain bourbon, and the luxury of clean linens after weeks of rough camping. Ezekiel had built something more precious than gold, an unshakable trust. The property employed a small but devoted staff. Tobias Crane, a grizzled mountain guide in his 50s, had served as foreman since the lodge's founding days. His knowledge of the surrounding wilderness was encyclopedic, and his loyalty to the Blackwood family was unwavering. Two Scottish immigrants, the MacLeod brothers Duncan and Hamish, had arrived 5 years earlier, seeking employment and stability in the New World. They occupied a cabin near the property's northern boundary and managed the agricultural operations with Highland efficiency. The spring of 1830 marked the beginning of what locals would later recall as the Lodge's golden era. The sisters, initially collaborating out of necessity, discovered they possessed an extraordinary talent for making guests feel not merely welcome, but genuinely treasured. Victoria's business expertise kept the operation profitable. Isabella's charm convinced guests to extend their stays far beyond their original plans. Constance's mastery of mountain cuisine and medicinal preparations enhanced their reputation for comfort and care. But something darker was taking root beneath this veneer of mountain hospitality. The isolation that had once shielded the Blackwood family from frontier dangers now provided something else entirely: complete privacy. And privacy for 3 intelligent young women with flexible morals could prove to be an extremely dangerous commodity. It was a December evening in 1830 when Marcus Thornfield arrived at Blackwood Lodge, bringing with him the first glimpse of the horror to come. Thornfield was a fur trader from St. Louis, traveling alone with a substantial collection of pelts and the gold coins he'd received from their sale. He was a man of 50 years, never married, with no close family ties, precisely the type of guest the sisters would later learn to identify with terrifying accuracy. The temperature had plummeted well below freezing, and heavy snow was beginning to accumulate when Thornfield's pack animals struggled up the winding path to the lodge. Victoria greeted him at the entrance with her practiced smile, immediately noting the quality of his winter gear, the value of his trade goods, and most importantly, the profound loneliness in his weathered features. A man who had spent decades in the wilderness with only occasional human contact was carrying more than just valuable furs. He was carrying a desperate hunger for companionship. "Welcome to Blackwood Lodge," Victoria said, her voice perfectly balancing professionalism with genuine warmth. "I'm Victoria Blackwood, and these are my sisters. We'll ensure your stay exceeds every expectation." Thornfield's eyes brightened as he absorbed the inviting atmosphere of the common hall, the aroma of Constance's venison roast, and the sight of Isabella arranging pine boughs despite the harsh weather. This was exactly what a solitary frontiersman needed, a place where attractive, attentive women would treat him like cherished family rather than just another paying customer. Over the following 4 days, the sisters provided Thornfield with an experience unlike any he'd ever encountered at a frontier establishment. Constance's meals were extraordinary culinary achievements, featuring perfectly prepared game, fresh bread, and her renowned apple preserves. Victoria engaged him in extensive discussions about trade routes and market conditions, making him feel intellectually valued and respected. Isabella's innocent delight in his wilderness stories made him feel worldly and sophisticated. But it was Isabella who supplied what Thornfield truly craved, the illusion of romantic possibility. On his 3rd evening, after other guests had retired, Isabella discovered Thornfield sitting alone beside the fire, staring into the flames with the hollow expression of a man who had spent too many years in solitude. She approached with 2 glasses of Constance's special spiced whiskey, each warmed perfectly in crystal tumblers that reflected the firelight. "You seem troubled, Mr. Thornfield," she said, settling gracefully into the chair beside him. "Sometimes sharing our burdens makes them easier to bear." For the next 3 hours, Thornfield found himself revealing his deepest thoughts to this beautiful woman who listened with such apparent compassion. He spoke of the endless loneliness of the fur trade, of winters spent in isolation so complete it nearly drove men insane, of returning to civilization only to find himself unable to connect with people who couldn't understand his experiences. Isabella listened with perfect sympathy, occasionally touching his arm or leaning closer with evident concern. "Loneliness is a cruel companion," she whispered as the fire burned lower, "but it doesn't have to be permanent." What transpired next was never documented in any official record, but Thornfield's demeanor the following morning revealed its own narrative. He moved through breakfast with the satisfied expression of a man who had rediscovered hope. He extended his planned stay by an additional week, despite his original urgency to reach Nashville. Most significantly, he began making detailed plans to return to Blackwood Lodge on his next trading expedition. "I've never experienced hospitality like this," he told Victoria as he prepared to depart. "You and your sisters have created something truly remarkable here. I'll be recommending this establishment to every trader I encounter." Victoria smiled graciously and accepted his generous payment, nearly triple the standard rate, pressed into her hands with genuine gratitude. "We eagerly await your return visit, Mr. Thornfield. Safe travels." But Marcus Thornfield would never reach Nashville. His pack animals were discovered 5 days later, wandering without their owner near Stones River. Thornfield himself had simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and a mystery that would never be officially investigated. The logical assumption for such a dangerous frontier was that he had fallen victim to bandits or wild animals. Only the Blackwood sisters knew the truth. Duncan MacLeod had been positioned in the forest 2 miles from the lodge when Thornfield departed that morning. The Scottish immigrant was skilled with tools and possessed the quiet efficiency that made him valuable for tasks requiring discretion. Thornfield never detected the blow that ended his life, delivered with a mason's hammer to the back of his skull. His body was wrapped in canvas and interred in a predetermined location deep in the mountain wilderness, while his substantial collection of gold coins made its way back to Blackwood Lodge. That evening, the 3 sisters gathered around their kitchen table, counting Thornfield's money and planning their future. Victoria had calculated the numbers. The amount they'd just acquired exceeded the lodge's legitimate earnings for an entire year. Isabella had demonstrated that isolated men could be manipulated with shocking ease. Constance had proven that evidence could be eliminated through proper application of mountain craft and botanical knowledge. "He won't be missed for months," Victoria observed, arranging the gold coins with business-like precision. "No family, no close associates, traveling alone to markets where no one expects him. Perfect." "It was almost effortless," Isabella added, maintaining the same gentle expression she'd used to comfort their victim. "He would have given us anything we requested." What they had discovered that cold December night was something far more valuable than gold. They had discovered how to make people disappear without consequence. The winter of 1831 provided the sisters with time to refine their methodology and establish the procedures that would serve them for nearly 2 decades. Victoria, with her sharp business acumen, developed a system for identifying optimal targets. The ideal victim was a man traveling alone, carrying substantial wealth, with minimal family connections and no rigid schedule that would raise immediate alarm if he failed to arrive at his destination. Constance's role expanded beyond cooking and household management. Her knowledge of Appalachian plants grew to include detailed study of toxic species and their effects. Pokeweed roots, when properly prepared, could induce symptoms resembling typhoid fever. Jimson weed could cause delirium and respiratory failure that appeared natural. Bitterroot could kill within hours while leaving minimal traces. She established a concealed garden behind the main lodge where she cultivated these plants alongside legitimate herbs, creating a pharmaceutical arsenal disguised as a medicinal patch. Isabella perfected the art of psychological manipulation, learning to identify men's deepest vulnerabilities and present herself as their solution. She studied her targets methodically, adapting her personality to match their needs. For the devout, she became deeply religious. For the educated, she transformed into a well-read conversationalist. For the heartbroken, she offered healing and understanding. Her ability to become whatever a man required was both her greatest weapon and her most terrifying talent. The logistics of disposal had been worked out with Highland efficiency by the MacLeod brothers. Duncan had located a series of natural limestone caverns in the mountainside, accessible only through a hidden entrance concealed by fallen timber. Bodies could be transported there under darkness and sealed behind loose rocks, where the mountain's natural chemistry would accelerate decomposition. Personal effects were carefully sorted. Anything valuable was retained, while items that might identify victims were buried separately or destroyed. Tobias Crane's role proved perhaps the most crucial. His reputation in the region was beyond question, and his testimony carried weight with local authorities. When questions were occasionally raised about missing travelers, Tobias would solemnly confirm that the individual had indeed lodged at Blackwood Lodge, but had departed in excellent health and spirits. His weathered face and honest demeanor never failed to satisfy even the most persistent investigator. The summer of 1831 brought their second victim, a cattle buyer named Samuel Morrison from North Carolina. Morrison was transporting nearly $600 in silver coins, the proceeds from a successful season's purchases. He was a widower of 42, known for his solitary nature and his habit of conducting business alone to avoid sharing profits with partners. Morrison arrived on a humid July evening, immediately attracted to the cool comfort of the lodge. After weeks of uncomfortable camping, the sisters deployed their refined strategy with precision. Victoria engaged him in business discussions, learning about his financial situation and travel itinerary. Constance provided exceptional meals that made him reluctant to continue his journey. Isabella entertained him with songs and conversation that reminded him of the wife he'd lost 5 years earlier. But it was Isabella who sealed Morrison's fate. On his fourth night at the lodge, she discovered him sitting alone on the front porch, staring into the star-filled mountain sky with the hollow expression of a man who had lost everything meaningful. She approached with apparent hesitation, carrying 2 glasses of Constance's special mint julep, each cooled perfectly with mountain spring water. "You seem melancholy, Mr. Morrison," she said, settling beside him on the wooden bench. "The mountains can make a person feel very small and alone." For 3 hours, Morrison found himself sharing his deepest sorrows with this compassionate woman who listened with such genuine attention. He spoke of his late wife, Rebecca, of their stillborn children, of returning each night to an empty farmhouse that still held her scent in the curtains she'd sewn. Isabella listened with perfect empathy, occasionally touching his hand or moving closer with apparent sympathy. "Grief is a heavy burden," she said softly as the night sounds of the forest surrounded them, "but it doesn't have to be carried alone." Morrison extended his planned overnight stay into 2 weeks, during which Isabella gradually deepened their intimacy, while Constance began introducing small quantities of bitterroot extract into his evening beverages. The symptoms developed gradually: mild nausea, slight confusion, nothing alarming enough to cause immediate concern. Morrison attributed his discomfort to the emotional turmoil of his unexpected romantic feelings. On his final night at Blackwood Lodge, Isabella invited Morrison to join her for a private supper in her room. Constance had prepared his favorite dishes, along with wine containing a precisely calculated dose of concentrated pokeweed extract. As Morrison sat across from Isabella in the intimate candlelight, sharing his hopes and dreams with a woman he believed might restore meaning to his life, he had no awareness that he was already dying. The poison functioned exactly as Constance had predicted. Morrison's death appeared to be sudden heart failure brought on by excitement and physical exertion. His body was discovered the following morning in Isabella's chamber, apparently having died peacefully during the night following an evening of passion. Even if a physician had been available to examine the corpse, the symptoms perfectly matched those of natural cardiac arrest in a middle-aged man with a previously inactive lifestyle. Morrison was interred with appropriate ceremony in the lodge's small graveyard, a final detail that Victoria had incorporated into their operation. A proper burial complete with a carved headstone provided the appearance of respectful treatment while actually serving as the perfect concealment. The cemetery contained graves of several generations of Blackwood family members, making additional burials unremarkable to local observers. Morrison's money and valuable personal effects disappeared into the sisters' expanding treasury, while his wagon and livestock were sold to passing merchants weeks later. His disappearance was attributed to a decision to settle permanently in Tennessee rather than return to North Carolina, a plausible explanation that no one questioned too closely. By the end of 1831, the sisters had perfected a system that was virtually undetectable. They had learned to space their crimes carefully, never targeting more than 3 or 4 victims annually to avoid creating patterns that might attract attention. They developed cover stories for guests who died at the lodge, ranging from heart attacks to accidents to decisions to relocate permanently in the West. Most importantly, they learned to trust each other absolutely, creating a conspiracy so secure that not even the slightest hint of their activities ever reached the outside world. Between 1832 and 1845, Blackwood Lodge achieved a reputation that extended throughout the southeastern region and beyond. Travelers spoke of it with the same reverent tones reserved for the finest establishments in Charleston or Richmond. The sisters had created something unprecedented, a remote mountain lodge that provided luxury accommodations and service rivaling the best urban hotels. Victoria had expanded their legitimate business operations significantly. The lodge now maintained stables of quality horses for guests, operated a small distillery producing premium mountain whiskey, and even offered guided hunting expeditions led by Tobias Crane. These legal enterprises provided substantial income and, more importantly, established the sisters' reputation as accomplished businesswomen rather than simple innkeepers. The guest registry from this period, carefully preserved in the Tennessee State Archives, documents their success. Merchants from Atlanta, politicians from Nashville, land speculators from Louisville, and adventurers from as far away as Philadelphia signed their names in Victoria's elegant ledger. Many returned repeatedly, becoming regular patrons who recommended Blackwood Lodge to their colleagues and associates. But concealed within this legitimate success operated a carefully orchestrated killing apparatus that functioned with mechanical precision. The sisters had refined their victim selection to an exact science. Isabella developed an almost supernatural ability to identify men who would never be missed. The loners, the outcasts, those carrying secrets that prevented them from forming close relationships. Constance's knowledge of toxins had expanded to include dozens of plant and mineral poisons, each with different symptoms and detection profiles. Victoria coordinated everything with the precision of a military campaign. During these years, they claimed approximately 38 victims, the exact number later discovered by the Geological Survey team. Each death was meticulously planned and executed according to strict protocols that minimize risk while maximizing profit. The sisters developed comprehensive profiles of their targets, sometimes observing potential victims for weeks before making their final decision. Consider the case of Jonathan Whitmore, a land surveyor from Georgia who arrived in September 1836. Whitmore was conducting mapping work for the state government, a job requiring him to travel alone through remote areas for months at a time. He carried surveying equipment worth considerable money, along with payment for his work and funds for purchasing property parcels he'd identified as investment opportunities. Victoria immediately recognized Whitmore as an ideal target. His work required extended periods away from civilization, meaning his disappearance might not be noticed for months. His surveying activities provided perfect cover. He could easily have fallen victim to any number of natural hazards while working alone in dangerous territory. Most importantly, his somewhat antisocial personality meant he had few close friends who would pursue investigations if he failed to return. The sisters began their campaign immediately. Constance prepared special meals featuring game Whitmore had watched Tobias hunt, creating a connection between the food and the rugged mountain environment he found so appealing. Victoria engaged him in conversations about his mapping work, expressing fascination with his technical expertise and making him feel appreciated for his knowledge. Isabella discussed potential land investments with him, positioning herself as a local expert who could help him identify profitable opportunities. But it was Isabella who provided the element that sealed Whitmore's fate. She approached him not as a potential romantic conquest, but as a kindred spirit who shared his love of the wilderness. She revealed an apparently extensive knowledge of mountain flora and fauna, gleaned from years of careful study, that actually served her poison research. She accompanied him on brief surveying expeditions around the lodge's property, demonstrating a comfort with outdoor life that Whitmore found irresistible. "I've never encountered a woman who understood the wilderness the way you do," Whitmore told her during one of their expeditions, his professional reserve finally dissolving. "Most people see only danger and hardship, but you see the beauty and order beneath. I've lived here my entire life," Isabella replied, moving closer as they stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. "The mountains have taught me things that books never could. Things about life, about death, about the balance between them." Whitmore extended his planned 3-day stay into a month, ostensibly to conduct more thorough surveying work in the area, but actually because he had fallen completely under Isabella's influence. During this time, Constance gradually introduced increasingly potent toxins into his food, creating symptoms that mimicked the early stages of mountain fever, a genuine hazard that had claimed several surveyors in recent years. The poison Constance used for Whitmore was her own innovation, an extract from destroying angel mushrooms that produced liver failure over several days. The symptoms perfectly matched those of mountain fever, and even an experienced physician would have been unlikely to distinguish between the two conditions. Whitmore's death appeared to be a tragic but entirely predictable occupational hazard. His surveying equipment was sold to a merchant in Kentucky, while his detailed maps became part of Victoria's growing collection of intelligence about the region's geography and resources. His body joined the others in the sealed mountain caverns, while his name was added to local records as another victim of the dangerous frontier lifestyle. The genius of the sisters' operation lay not merely in their killing methods, but in their ability to maintain the facade of respectability. The attended church services in the nearby settlement of Cumberland Gap contributed generously to community causes and maintained friendships with local families. Victoria served on the board of the Regional Merchants Association, while Constance provided medical assistance to neighboring farms during times of illness. Isabella taught Sunday school to local children, and all three sisters organized social events that brought together isolated mountain families. This community involvement served multiple purposes. It provided them with alibis and character witnesses for times when questions might be raised about missing guests. It gave them access to information about travelers passing through the region. Most importantly, it established them as pillars of the community, whose word would never be questioned by local authorities. The sisters also developed an extensive network of business relationships that helped legitimize their growing wealth. They invested in land purchases throughout the region, gradually assembling a portfolio of properties that generated rental income and appreciated in value. They loaned money to local farmers and merchants, earning both interest payments and influence within the community. They even purchased shares in several steamboat companies operating on the Cumberland River, diversifying their investments while creating additional income sources. By 1845, the Blackwood sisters were among the wealthiest landowners in eastern Tennessee. Their success story was held up as an example of what determined women could achieve, even in the challenging frontier environment. Local newspapers occasionally featured articles about the enterprising Blackwood sisters, who had built a thriving business empire from their inherited mountain property. But beneath this facade of legitimate success lay the carefully concealed bones of more than 38 men who had made the fatal mistake of accepting the sisters' hospitality. Each death had added to their wealth and refined their methods, creating a cycle of murder and profit that seemed impossible to stop or detect. The isolation that had initially protected them from discovery now provided something even more valuable: the perfect environment for their predatory activities. Blackwood Lodge had become a spider's web, beautiful and inviting on the surface, but deadly to anyone who became entangled in its strands. The beginning of the end came not from law enforcement or suspicious relatives, but from an unexpected source, one of their own employees. Hamish MacLeod, the younger of the two Scottish brothers, had been growing increasingly unstable since a logging accident in the fall of 1847 that left him with chronic pain and a dependence on laudanum for relief. Hamish had always been the more sensitive of the MacLeod brothers, and the years of participating in the sisters' crimes had taken a psychological toll that his brother Duncan either ignored or failed to recognize. The laudanum, initially prescribed by Constance for legitimate pain relief, had gradually become Hamish's escape from the guilt and nightmares that plagued his sleep. But addiction brought its own problems: paranoia, mood swings, and a tendency toward loose talk that made him increasingly dangerous to the operation. The crisis began on a cold February morning in 1848, when Hamish appeared at the kitchen door of the main lodge, his eyes wild with drug-induced panic and his clothes disheveled from a sleepless night. Constance was alone in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for a traveling merchant from Georgia who had arrived the previous evening, a man the sisters had already identified as their next target. "I cannot continue," Hamish whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "I see their faces every night. Every time I close my eyes, they're all standing there watching me. 38 men, Constance. 38 souls crying out for justice." Constance maintained her composure, but her mind raced as she calculated the threat Hamish now represented. His knowledge of their crimes was complete and detailed. He could provide authorities with exact locations of burial sites, descriptions of murder methods, and testimony that would send all three sisters to the gallows. "You're unwell, Hamish," she said gently, moving closer with apparent concern. "The laudanum is affecting your mind. You're seeing things that aren't real." "No," Hamish's voice rose dangerously, and Constance glanced toward the ceiling, hoping the guest upstairs hadn't been awakened. "I know what we've done. I know what you've made me do. And I know it must stop." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Hamish alternating between tearful confessions and angry accusations, while Constance tried to calm him without alerting the rest of the household. She eventually managed to convince him to return to his cabin with a promise that they would discuss the situation later, after he'd had time to rest and clear his head. But Constance knew there would be no later discussion. Hamish Blackwood had become a liability that threatened everything they'd built, and liabilities had to be eliminated. That evening, after their guest had retired for the night, Constance prepared a special dinner for the Blackwood brothers, a gesture of appreciation for their years of loyal service, she explained to Duncan. The meal featured Hamish's favorite dishes, along with Constance's special whiskey that contained enough concentrated foxglove extract to stop a man's heart within hours. Hamish died quietly in his sleep that night, his death attributed to the same heart condition that had supposedly claimed several of their guests over the years. Duncan, who had consumed less of the poisoned whiskey due to his natural temperance, survived but with significant cardiac damage that left him weakened and dependent on Constance's medical care. Hamish's death solved their immediate problem, but created new challenges. Duncan, despite his physical weakness, began asking pointed questions about his brother's sudden demise. The similarities between Hamish's symptoms and those exhibited by several of their guests had not escaped his notice, and his loyalty to the sisters was wavering under the weight of suspicion and grief. Victoria recognized that their operation was entering a critical phase. The network of trust and complicity that had protected them for nearly 2 decades was beginning to fracture, and any significant investigation would uncover evidence that even their considerable influence couldn't suppress. She began making contingency plans for the possibility that they might need to abandon Blackwood Lodge. The final guest to die at Blackwood Lodge was Henry Patterson, a cotton broker from Savannah who arrived in March 1849 with over $800 in gold coins and banknotes. Patterson was a widower in his 50s, traveling north to negotiate contracts with textile mills in Virginia. His death followed the sisters' established pattern, apparent heart failure after several days of exceptional hospitality that included intimate companionship with Isabella. But Patterson's death marked a crucial change in the sisters' methodology. For the first time in nearly 20 years, they made a significant mistake. Patterson had arranged to meet a business associate in Richmond on a specific date, and when he failed to appear, his colleague began making inquiries that eventually reached local authorities in Tennessee. Sheriff William Garrett of Cumberland County was a capable lawman with over 15 years of experience, but he had never encountered anything like the Blackwood sisters' operation. His initial investigation was routine, a few questions to confirm that Patterson had indeed stayed at the lodge and departed in good health. Victoria and Tobias provided their usual testimony, supported by carefully maintained guest records that showed Patterson's departure date and intended destination. But Garrett was more persistent than previous inquirers, and his investigation began uncovering small inconsistencies in the sister's story. A blacksmith in the next county remembered shoeing a horse that matched the description of Patterson's mount, but several days after the businessman was supposed to have passed through the area. A merchant recalled purchasing supplies from someone who resembled Patterson, but again, the timing didn't match the official departure date from Blackwood Lodge. These discrepancies were minor and might have been explained by any number of innocent factors, but they were enough to plant seeds of doubt in Garrett's mind. he began looking more closely at other missing persons cases involving travelers who had last been seen in the Blackwood Lodge area. And the pattern that emerged was deeply troubling. Sheriff Garrett's investigation accelerated rapidly once he began examining the broader pattern of disappearances around Blackwood Lodge. His review of county records revealed that over the past 20 years, at least 12 different missing persons cases had involved travelers who were last confirmed to be staying at the Blackwood property. While individual cases could be explained by the various hazards of frontier travel, the statistical clustering was impossible to ignore. Garrett was careful not to alert the sisters to his investigation, conducting his inquiries discreetly and avoiding direct contact with anyone connected to the lodge. His breakthrough came when he interviewed Duncan MacLeod during one of the Scotsman's rare trips to town for supplies. Duncan, still grieving his brother's death and increasingly suspicious about the circumstances surrounding it, proved more talkative than usual.
"My brother Hamish, he was troubled before he died," Duncan told Garrett during what appeared to be a casual conversation outside the general store. "He spoke of things that kept him awake at night. The mountains hold many secrets, Sheriff, and not all of them should stay buried." This cryptic statement might have meant nothing to a less experienced investigator, but Garrett recognized the signs of a man struggling with dangerous knowledge. He arranged a private meeting with Duncan at a location far from Blackwood Lodge, where the full truth finally began to emerge. Duncan's confession was halting and incomplete. Years of fear and loyalty struggled against guilt and suspicion as he revealed fragments of what he knew. He couldn't bring himself to explicitly accuse the sisters of murder, but he provided enough details about mysterious late-night activities, unexplained burials, and his brother's growing distress to give Garrett the evidence he needed to obtain search warrants. The raid on Blackwood Lodge was conducted at dawn on April 20th, 1849, with a force of 10 armed deputies surrounding the property to prevent escape. Garrett had coordinated with federal marshals to ensure that any evidence found would be properly handled, recognizing that the case might involve crimes across state lines. The sisters met the arrival of law enforcement with characteristic composure. Victoria greeted Garrett at the front door with polite concern, expressing hope that she could assist with whatever investigation had brought them to their property. Isabella appeared genuinely distressed by the suggestion that anything improper might have occurred at their respectable establishment. Constance offered to prepare refreshments for the officers, while all three seemed confused and frightened by the accusations being leveled against their family. But their practice performances couldn't conceal the physical evidence that 20 years of murder had left behind. The search of the main lodge revealed several items that clearly belonged to missing travelers. A distinctive gold pocket watch engraved with Henry Patterson's initials, a leather satchel containing business documents belonging to Marcus Thornfield, and a collection of personal letters and photographs that represented dozens of different victims. More damning still was Constance's carefully maintained garden of poisonous plants, which included several species that had no legitimate medicinal applications. Her collection of books on botany and chemistry revealed an expertise in toxicology that went far beyond the knowledge required for normal household remedies. Hidden in her private room, investigators found detailed notes describing the effects and dosages of various plant toxins, along with records that clearly corresponded to the deaths of specific guests. The discovery of the burial caverns was the final piece of evidence needed to confirm the scope of the sisters' crimes. Duncan, facing charges as an accessory to murder, led investigators to the concealed entrance behind the fallen timber. Inside the caverns, exactly as the Geological Survey team would find them months later, were the skeletal remains of 38 men, along with personal effects worth thousands of dollars. Each skeleton told its own story of violent death. The puncture wounds found at the base of several skulls indicated that some victims had been killed quickly with sharp instruments, likely while they were unconscious from poison or alcohol. Others showed signs of strangulation or suffocation. A few appeared to have died from poison alone, their bones showing the chemical changes associated with heavy metal toxicity.
Newspapers throughout the country covered the case, fascinated by the story of 3 women who had operated one of the most successful criminal enterprises in American history. The prosecution, led by District Attorney James Morrison, presented overwhelming evidence of a conspiracy that had lasted nearly 20 years and claimed more than 38 lives. Victoria maintained her innocence throughout the proceedings, claiming that any evidence found at the lodge had been planted by enemies seeking to destroy their family's reputation. Isabella broke down completely during her testimony, alternating between denials and tearful confessions that implicated all 3 sisters in the murders. Constance refused to speak at all, maintaining a stoic silence that many interpreted as an admission of guilt. The defense strategy focused on the isolation and vulnerability of 3 orphaned women trying to survive in a dangerous frontier environment. The sisters' attorney, Robert Caldwell, argued that they had been driven to desperate measures by circumstances beyond their control, and that their youth and gender should be considered as mitigating factors in their sentencing. But the overwhelming evidence and the shocking scope of their crimes made any sympathy difficult to sustain. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts for all 3 defendants on multiple counts of murder in the first degree. The executions were swift and final. Victoria, Isabella, and Constance were condemned to hang, their executions scheduled for November 15, 1849. The executions were carried out as scheduled on a gray November morning, with hundreds of spectators gathering to witness the end of the Blackwood sisters' story. Victoria faced her death with the same cold composure she had shown throughout the trial, offering no final words of remorse or explanation. Isabella and Constance stood together on the scaffold, holding hands as the nooses were placed around their necks. Their final moment of sisterly solidarity, a stark contrast to the calculated cruelty they had shown their victims. Duncan MacLeod, granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, disappeared shortly after the trial concluded. Some reports placed him in Ohio, others in Missouri, but he was never officially located again. The trauma of his brother's death and his role in exposing the sisters' crimes appeared to have broken him completely, leaving him unable to settle anywhere or form lasting relationships. Tobias Crane faced charges as an accessory to murder, but his advanced age and his cooperation with authorities earned him a reduced sentence of 8 years in prison. He died in custody in 1852, reportedly still maintaining that he had never suspected the true nature of the sisters' activities and had believed their explanations for the various deaths and disappearances. Blackwood Lodge itself was sold at auction to satisfy legal judgments against the estate. The new owners, a family named Harrison from Nashville, attempted to continue operating it as a legitimate inn, but the property's notorious reputation made it impossible to attract guests. The building stood empty for several years before being purchased by a mining company that demolished the structures and converted the land to industrial use. The limestone caverns where the victims' remains were discovered were permanently sealed by order of the court, with a simple stone marker erected to commemorate the 38 men who died at Blackwood Lodge. The marker, which still stands today according to local historical societies, bears only the inscription, "Here lie unknown travelers, 1830 to 1849. May they find the peace in death that was denied them in life."
The case had far-reaching implications for inn and hotel regulation throughout Tennessee and neighboring states. New laws were enacted requiring more detailed guest registration procedures, mandatory reporting of guest deaths to local authorities, and regular inspections of establishments serving travelers. The Blackwood laws, as they became known, remained in effect well into the 20th century. Perhaps most significantly, the Blackwood Lodge case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation and the potential for evil to flourish in places far from civilized oversight. Criminal investigators began paying closer attention to patterns of disappearances around remote establishments, leading to the discovery of several smaller-scale operations that might otherwise have continued undetected. The financial investigation revealed the true scope of the sisters' success. Their estate, including land holdings, business investments, and liquid assets, was valued at over $45,000, an enormous fortune for the time period. The money was used to compensate victims' families where possible and to fund improvements to law enforcement capabilities in remote areas of Tennessee. Modern criminologists who have studied the case note several factors that contributed to the sisters' remarkable success. Their operation combined careful victim selection, sophisticated killing methods, excellent disposal techniques, and most importantly, a perfect cover story that made their crimes nearly invisible to contemporary investigators. The isolation of their location provided privacy for their activities, while their reputation for hospitality created a steady stream of potential victims. The psychological profiles developed by modern experts suggest that Victoria was the primary architect of the operation, possessing the antisocial personality traits and organizational skills necessary to plan and execute such a complex criminal enterprise. Isabella likely suffered from what would now be recognized as borderline personality disorder, making her capable of forming intense but ultimately meaningless emotional connections with victims. Constance's expertise with poisons suggests a fascination with death and control that bordered on sadistic. What makes the Blackwood Lodge case particularly chilling is how easily it could have continued indefinitely. Had Hamish McLeod not suffered his psychological breakdown, or had Sheriff Garrett been less persistent in his investigation, the sisters might have continued their activities for decades longer. The randomness of their ultimate discovery serves as a reminder that many historical crimes may have gone completely undetected, their perpetrators taking their secrets to unmarked graves. The story of the Blackwood sisters also highlights the vulnerability of travelers in the pre-industrial era. When communication was slow and transportation was dangerous, a man could disappear between two towns and not be missed for months, if ever. The sisters exploited this vulnerability with ruthless efficiency, turning the hospitality industry itself into a weapon against the lonely and isolated. Local folklore in eastern Tennessee preserved distorted versions of the Blackwood Lodge story for generations. Some tales portrayed the sisters as victims of circumstance who were driven to desperate measures by poverty and isolation. Others transformed them into supernatural entities who lured victims through magical means rather than simple manipulation. The truth, as revealed by court records and contemporary accounts, is both more mundane and more terrifying than any ghost story. The physical location of Blackwood Lodge remained a source of local superstition well into the 20th century. Hunters and hikers reported finding unusual artifacts in the area: old buttons, pieces of clothing, rusted metal objects that might once have belonged to the sisters' victims. Whether these discoveries were genuine relics or simply the products of overactive imaginations influenced by the location's notorious history remains unknown. Several attempts were made over the years to locate additional burial sites that might contain victims who were disposed of through other methods. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in the 1970s identified several soil anomalies consistent with unmarked graves, but legal and ethical considerations prevented extensive excavation. The possibility remains that the 38 victims found in the caverns represent only a portion of the sisters' total kill count. The Blackwood case file, housed in the Tennessee State Archives, continues to attract researchers and amateur historians fascinated by one of America's most successful serial killing operations. The detailed records kept by Victoria Blackwood, combined with Constance's botanical notes and the physical evidence recovered from the property, provide an unusually complete picture of how such crimes were planned and executed in the 19th century. This mystery shows us how easily evil can hide behind a facade of respectability and how isolation can provide the perfect cover for the most heinous crimes. The story of the Blackwood sisters serves as a reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like charming hostesses, offering weary travelers exactly what they need most. What haunts me most about this case is how the sisters turned the very concept of hospitality into a weapon. They understood that lonely, isolated men craved not just comfort but connection, and they weaponized that fundamental human need. The warmth they offered was real enough to fool their victims completely, right up until the moment it killed them. The Blackwood Lodge case remains one of the most sophisticated criminal operations in American history, a testament to how intelligence, patience, and complete moral bankruptcy can create a nearly perfect killing machine. In those remote Tennessee mountains, 3 sisters discovered that the right combination of charm, poison, and isolation could make people disappear as completely as if they had never existed at all. The legacy of their crimes extends far beyond the 38 confirmed victims. Every missing person case from that era must now be viewed through the lens of what we know is possible. That behind the warm glow of a welcoming inn might lurk predators whose hunger for wealth is matched only by their complete indifference to human life. So the next time you find yourself traveling through remote country, staying at that charming little inn that seems almost too perfect, remember the Blackwood sisters. Remember that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who make you feel most welcome, most appreciated, most loved. Because in the end, that's exactly what makes you the perfect victim. What do you think about this chilling tale from America's dark past? Do you believe all the secrets of Blackwood Lodge were uncovered? Or might there be more victims still waiting to be discovered in those Tennessee mountains? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the Holloway Archives for more stories from the shadows of American history. Until next time, remember that the past is full of secrets, and some of them are darker than we ever imagined.